sitting. I'm waiting for you to pick me. Please, let's give those at the decks a minute to sit down. Those of you registering, please, when you are done, kindly sit down so that we can. And don't sit at the back. Please, move forward. Any of the chairs. Hey. Hey, have I mentioned anybody's name? I just said hey. You can sit at where you are sitting and it's fine. You can. Good morning once again. I hope we all had a good night's sleep. We thank God for another day. We thank Allah for another day. I welcome you to the National Validation Meeting to validate and solicit inputs to enrich a study carried out to analyze trade, financial inclusion, and agricultural policies with a gender and social inclusion lens, to inform advocacy efforts by the Network for Women's Rights towards inclusive, sustainable development. NETRIGHT is implementing a project on leveraging collective power for inclusive, sustainable development as part of initiatives under the Star Ghana Foundation interventions with support from Hewlett for the phase 2 of the Action for Voice, Influence and Inclusive Development, known as AVID-2 project. NETRIGHT's AVID interventions is aimed at facilitating women's access and control of economic resources through capacity building and advocacy for policy reforms. Women's access to economic resources continue to be a challenge due to systemic and structural barriers limiting their livelihood options, especially women who find themselves in vulnerable situations. However, interventions by governments over the years, and when I say governments, not only the current government, but all governments that we've had from the past, over the years to enhance women's access to economic resources, do not consciously tackle systemic and structural issues to strengthen women's access to and control of economic resources. According to MOFA, only 27% of women farmers have access to extension officers, compared to 57% of men. The leave here. So I'll now call on Raymond. No, I don't have. I just have Star Ghana Foundation. I'm trying to remember your full name, but I'm not able to. So I'll call on Raymond to give us brief remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, distinguished guests, partners, participants. Star Ghana is truly honored to be part of this national validation meeting today, which is organized by Netrite and focusing on the gender gaps in the trade and agricultural policies. This meeting truly also aligns with our work under the AVID Project Phase 2, which is the Action for Voice, Inclusive and Inclusive Development. Precisely this project or the intervention is looking at creating spaces and voices for the underserved population, specifically women, our women within the agricultural sector, the smallholder farmers, small-scale agro-processors, PWDs, and so on and so forth, to give them voice, to be able to ensure that their issues are really mainstream within the policy sector, and to ensure that development is truly sustainable and addressing all the issues that women face. Of course, we just heard the fact that women continue to face systemic barriers, especially when it comes to land ownership, on equal access to inputs, including even access to credits. And therefore, this undermines their efforts in accessing economic resources and opportunities. This is why this partnership is truly working with not only Netrite, but also other partners to look at broadly what are the systemic issues within the gender spectrum, and of course also across different sectors. This intervention really is looking at three main thematic areas. First, looking at the gender lens. Secondly, also focusing on strengthening farmer capacity, women farmers' capacity in smart agriculture, as well as financial literacy. And of course, also facilitating discussions between national level and local level actors in the area of access to economic resources and business opportunities. Truly, this meeting is timely and relevant. Why? Because it provides us, Star Ghana, and all of us here the opportunity to contribute to this draft report from a gender lens or a participatory lens. Again, Star Ghana, we truly believe that our diverse perspective here from different partners would enrich the report and make it actionable. And finally, also, we believe that this report finally is going to contribute to building a momentum for us to continue to engage in policy and also to deepen our advocacy work, which by and large also aligns with the Ministry of Trade's Women in Trade, Agribusiness, Industry Policy as outlined in the 2025 National Budget Statement. So on behalf of Star Ghana, I would like to thank Netrite for this wonderful work, and also to thank all the partners for your time, your voice, your commitment. Star Ghana, we always say that we can't do it alone, and no one partner can do it alone. We need to work together and constantly bring in our expertise, our resources, and experiences within the field. That's the only way civil society can help to bring about change, and especially also to ensure that our women in general are not left out, because they are not just statistics, but also they form the bulk of the workforce within the agricultural sector. So I'd like to say a big thank you to all of us once again, and to wish for us a fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond, for the remarks and also for the support that you are giving CSOs, especially under this project, to ensure that our rural women farmers are also able to access productive resources, and also, like you said, use smart agriculture to enhance the products and their products. We'll quickly do an introduction, and then after that we continue. So I'm Patricia Blankson-Akakpo with Netrite. Can we start from Cynthia, your table? So when it gets to your table, you put on, there are microphones on each table, so you put on them. Cynthia, you put it on, so put it on. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Sun and I work with Netrite.
Good morning. I'm Theodora Asare from Plan International Ghana.
Good morning. I'm Juliet Amasafa from the Women in Agriculture Directorate.
Hello, my name is Mawe. I work with CARE. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, good morning. My name is Raymond Danso. I serve as the Portfolio Manager at Right to Social Services, Star Ghana Foundation.
Good morning. My name is Stella Day, Director, Gracia Andio Company Limited.
My name is Rachel Awenso Alabila, Kofo Scholars Program, Alumni.
Good morning. My name is Anite Ukwatari. I work for Star Ghana Foundation.
Good morning. My name is Ibrahim Akalibila, working with GTLC.
Good morning. My name is Abigail Amponsande from Qualifying Producers Union. We grow fresh pineapples.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Ibrahim Musa. I work with Water in Ghana.
Good morning. I'm Ama Opondia. Today is my day. The consultant for today.
My name is Enyona Mbaku, otherwise known as Oniche Amu the First, Development Queen. I'm the founding president of Avatime Women's Association. We produce the best mountain organic brown rice for health. For
I
the
like
past
the
25 years.
Okay. I like the way she marketed her product. I hope you brought some of the rice for us to buy.
Please, sorry, I didn't bring some. But I will meet you later because I've seen you in Ho before.
Oh, okay.
Yes. When I was the assemblywoman, we met.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Victor Klena Mafedo. I work with the Lady Woman of the Day.
Good morning. My name is Samuela Sechi. I also work with Dr. Nana Mada's family.
Hello, my name is Rosemary Sakutin, Netrite Steering Committee member and also a Bantu.
And a founding member of Netrite.
Good morning. My name is Comfort Freeman. I'm also a senior lecturer in the Department of Agricultural Extension from the School of Agriculture, University of Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you. So for those joining us, when you have the opportunity to contribute to the make any contribution, then you mention your name. When we look across the room, realize that we all have got something to do with the study today. Either we are working in the agri area or on trade or interested in financial inclusion. So one way or the other, we all have interest in what would be presented today. And I believe whichever presentation we receive today, as I mentioned earlier on, would also contribute our inputs to ensure that we have a report that would all are happy to work with. I will now call on Dr. Naname Enim Opondia. I said I have a long name, but Naname, you also have a long name. The consultant, to present the findings and recommendations. And we are privileged to have Dr. Rosemary Sakutin in our midst. She's a steering committee member of Netrite. And they are the pillars of Netrite. They are those behind the scenes that are doing it. So thank you, probably known as AKA Auntie Rose, for joining us.
Thank you very much. I wear many hats. I would like to acknowledge my seniors at the University of Ghana. I'm also affiliated with them. I teach on a part-time basis at the Extension Department, but I'm also a postdoc student at the Sociology Department, so I'm in the University of Ghana. And but for today, I'm going to be your consultant. Part of the postdoc that I'm doing, we are looking at care policies. So it's actually looking at policies from a gender perspective. So that is why I'm now working with you on this particular one. So today, we're going to look at the policies in this order. So we have the introduction, but what is very important for me is the conceptualization of it and how I went about it. The 3 areas of focus is trade, financial inclusion, and agriculture. Once I'm done looking at these policies, the next step will be how do we bridge the gap of the gender issues that I'm raising. I think the essence of this is to be able to get all your input to make sure that I haven't missed anything and that we incorporate all your views and your challenges into it. So we know that women and youth are important. We know that women especially are very important, especially in the informal sector, because they move goods from where they are produced to where we consume them. We know and the risks that are involved. Sometimes moving tomatoes from the northern region down to the south. Without women, the economy, especially the informal economy, is not going to run smoothly. We know also that the work of others like Balinio talk about the fact that the food economy is about $3 trillion. It's going to be about $3 trillion in about 2030. And if women are the ones contributing to get to these figures, then it means that it's important that we are looking at their contribution and how to make them do it even better. We also know that in Ghana, we have a lot of young people. Ghana Statistical Services, for example, say that between 30% of the population disability or being a woman, there are other issues, like if you are a woman living in a rural area, you have different issues. Or if you are an older woman, you have different issues. If you are disabled and you are even living in Accra, how do you cross this? So there are a lot of mixed issues that we have to be looking at. I'm not able to move it. Okay. But we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity because if you look at the 2025 budget, there are 3 key things that the government is looking at. The second one is that it's anchored on offering a trusted hand to the vulnerable, particularly women and youth. So how do we take care of this opportunity? This work commissioned by NetRight and also Star Ghana is programmed to seize this opportunity to be able to make sure that vulnerable people are well taken care of. So because of that, the objectives of this research is really basically to use a gender lens to look into the policies that we have, and then the budget 2025, how the NDC manifesto, of course, and then how that translated into the 2025 budget. So we're going to review the MSME policies, Digital Financial Policy 2022, and then NDC Manifesto 2024, which translated into the 2025 budget. And then identify the JC gaps, and then make recommendations for responsive interventions at national and district levels. So we start. What does the literature say? Academics, we always like to go back to literature, right? At the agric level, we see that women contribute about 60 to 80% of agric labor. And this is, when we come to Ghana, we see that the contribution is specifically 50%. But if we look at land, they own they don't even own, they have access to just about 10% of the land, of the agric land, even though they are contributing 50% or more of the labor. Grok and others talk about disabled women who face double discrimination. So if you go into the rural areas, their issues are even more dire than just being a woman. If you're a blind woman, for example, in a village, that can be very traumatizing and difficult for you to work. And like I mentioned, the average age of farmers is also getting very high. They are kind of pensioners. Actually, you can even see them as early pensioners as it is, if you go into the communities. And the interesting thing, I remember we're doing some work at Dodowa. And these farmers, they tell you they don't even want their children to come into their profession. So there's that aspect of it. And why? Because there are lots of issues that are related to farming. And Udoho and others, for example, they talk about the fact that tools are outdated, the fact that there's not enough financing, and the support for them is also very little. And UN, for example, also notes the fact that even though some people live with disability, their research shows that when they have empowered them, they have contributed significantly to the incomes of their households. In terms of the finance aspect, we see that in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, just about 37% of women have access to bank accounts. And in Ghana, we have even an 11% gap between the men who have access to finance and women who have access to finance. And when you come to the rural area, of course, this is going to be much, much lower. We see them using especially the non-bank financial institutions, microfinance institutions, the associations, village associations, and those kinds of things. Only about 16% of rural women in Ghana use formal financial institutions. And ADB says that there is a need for a systemic issue. So I think Patricia was talking about the fact that we do a lot of piecemeals. Okay, there's a problem. Some microfinance institution or some women's project or something like that. AFDB talks about the need to have a more systemic women empowerment and financial inclusion intervention in finance. And even though mobile money has improved access, there was the e-levies and other taxes that had to be paid. Thankfully, that has gone. But there are other issues in terms of platforms, access, knowledge and education that we need to look at. When we look at trade, we see that about 92% of Ghanaian businesses are MSMEs. And they form about 80% of the workforce, with contributing about 70% of the national output. Women also dominate the informal sector. But when we look at the AFTA, for example, and I think I even put it in my report, I said on a lighter note, if you look at how we call AFTA, what is AFTA? After I've finished eating, I'll attend to you. After I've done what is important, I will attend to you. Why didn't we even call it AFTRADE? Then when you think about it, so even the way the acronym is formed, what does it connote to people when they think about it? AFTRADE versus AFTA, or I don't know. It was just something that I was thinking about. Anyway, so the benefits of AFTA, for example, others notes that unless we are able to reach non-literate, rural, disabled women and young people, these benefits will not really support our growth. So it's important. Some work by Netright and PAFO, for example, notes that it's important for us to look at gender-responsive policies. And so this study is coming at a very crucial time. First of all, that there are a lot of these issues that are raised. And secondly, so the issues is meeting the opportunity that government has created for us. How did I conceptualize the work? So I looked at Crenshaw's intersectionality. So intersectionality just means that somebody is not just a woman. You are a woman living in an urban area. You are an educated woman. You are a woman living with disability, or you are a young person, or you are an old person that is not educated, young person. So life is not just simple things that you can box people into. So when we talk about intersectionality, from the sociology point of view, we are looking at crossing or intersection between two or more categories. So when we look at power and dominance and oppression, so that is what I'm talking about. So if we look at, I feel so restricted with standing here. So if we look at, for example, you can be empowered as a woman when you are educated, when you are maybe young, when you are living in the city. But when you now look at the reverse of the intersectionalities, if you are an old woman living in the village with no education, they will even call you a witch at some point, right? This old woman with no teeth and everything, then you transition into a witch. So there are lots of issues that we have to deal with. So you don't simply look at it in terms of women, men, and all of that. There are a lot of crossroads that come together to form all of these. And I also looked at key principles by McPhail and Chikata, for example. They talk about the fact that McPhail talks about gender, when we look at gender in terms of whether they use gender-neutral language or whether they use an intervention is gender transformative or an intervention has gender-specific issues. These are all different items that we'll begin to break down when we get into the document. So the Jessie lens helps us to tailor the diverse supports that we have for people. How did I do it? Like I said, I used the framework by Chikata and McPhail. I did a desk review. So McPhail, for example, talks about the fact that sometimes we have all of these symbolic things. So yes, I've said it. AU Agenda 17, what do you call it? Whatever it is, or SDG 5. They use all these words, these symbols and things, but it's important for you to look at how that goes through the document, through implementation, through the conceptualization of it. So you can use things in a symbolic manner, but when it comes into the material, which is the actual doing of it, then you would have some issues. And then I did some desk reviews of the policies and of course other scholarly work. And then current updates from, I've looked at newspaper articles, especially where e-levy and other current happenings in the country. And then content analysis, so looking at, so for example, I will look at how many times are they using women in the microfinance policy, for example, or where is the concentration of women used at the introduction, does it run through? So you look at the documents and how women are used, for example. And then in intersectional focus, like I said, of youth, women, and the persons living with disabilities. And then I did some other consultations. I think some of them are here. We had an oil processing lady, a scholar, a young person, an exporter. She's also a trader, and poetry. I think Pamela is online. She's the head of the poetry association, Women Poetry Association in Ghana. So I also spoke with some of them to understand the issues from their perspectives. So now let's dig into the policies. When you pick the MSME policy, in fact, I struggled to get this document. So it's supposed to be online. When you go online, you click on it, nothing happens. Then it tells you that you should send an email. You send an email, no response. So you have to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. So eventually, the gentleman in my office finally got the document. So I was just thinking, so me that I think I'm educated, look at how I even struggled to get the documents in the first place. So can you imagine somebody who is not educated, how they will even feel if even me who claims I can read and write have all of these issues? But let's dig into it. So the MSCs form 92% of Ghana's businesses. We've talked about it. The policy aligns with the Marrakesh. So the Marrakesh Agreement was the agreement in Morocco that set up the World Trade Agreement, for example. So our document aligns with that, and also the AU agenda on supporting trade. It's inspired by national strategies like NIPE and the Ghana Coordinated Program. For example, it addresses the key gaps, regulation, lack of credits, and things like that. And it also aims to boost innovation and other things in the country. These are the highlights. So they talk about the background, what it's supposed to do, and then they give you the highlights. So these are kind of like the focus areas. What is it focusing on? Okay. Enabling environment, so institutional, legal regulation, and all of that. I've highlighted areas under each, so that each of the highlights are in bold, but when they talk about women, then I highlight that issue, and that is what I bring here. So enabling environments, it didn't have any language or anything about the vulnerable people that we are looking at. Finance for SMEs did. It talks about focusing on women and youth, set up concessionary bank loan schemes for women and youth. BDS, technology, market facilitation, entrepreneurship development, talks about youth, and then providing youth with regulatory, also the entrepreneurship leg. There are so many objectives in the document that you don't even know what is the thread running through it. So when we talk about BDS, what are we providing? They claim non-bank financial services. In the same way, they also entrepreneurship development. They also provide the non-bank financial services. So which objective, who is doing what? And then there's NIPE and there's GEA. All of them are doing innovation for young people. So what are the clear roles of each of these institutions? How don't they come together? And by the way, the purpose of this document was to bring together all, to align all the MSME development issues. And then even within that same document, there's also this confusion about who is doing what. So then I'm asking, did they really achieve that objective? And then they also have different definitions of micro enterprises. In fact, the MLG, Ministry of Local Government was what was surprising. They didn't even have a micro part. They are the ones that are most close to the people on the ground, local government, right? And yet they missed out the micro. And if we know that about 92%, I mean, a lot of the businesses fall within this category, and then MLG, Ministry of Local Government, is not even recognizing the micro. Look at all these women, they work with their family members, they have a small share butter processing unit, they work with family members and all of those things. How do we categorize them such that we can work with them? Then we look at Ghana Statistical Services talks about the fact that when you employ up to 5 people, then you are micro. So they use those categories to be able to categorize micro, small and medium enterprises. The document didn't have any monitoring indicators. It didn't have any implementation plan or anything. Apparently, I called the NIPE office. They said that, sorry, GE office. They said that, oh, they were going to prepare it, and the staff who was there said, well, they haven't seen it, but maybe somebody has found it. So then I asked her to check with her boss, and her boss said, long and short, I couldn't have access, and there was nothing like that. And then I talk about the fact that they use a lot of symbolic language. So they talk about the SDG 5 and the AU Agenda Item 8, which both address gender. But you look at it and you see a lot of gender neutral issues. So when we talk about gender neutrality, it has the potential for hiding a lot of the inequalities. So if we say everybody in Ghana has access to ghana.gov to pay their SNET and whatever it is, what about the women who cannot read? What about those who cannot have access, those who don't have internet? So we say it's gender neutral, and yet within it, there's a lot of nuance and there are a lot of things that we haven't paid attention to. Looking at the financial inclusion policy, its foundation was laid by the Ghana Microfinance Policy. Maybe most of you have heard about it. The Ghana Microfinance Policy took 2006 to reduce poverty and also support private sector-led growth. It started with the Financial Inclusion Insight Survey, which was funded by the World Bank. Then we came to the National Financial Inclusion Development Strategy, and then a roadmap, a cash-light roadmap, before finally we got the Digital Financial Services Policy. Over here, you see there was a lot of heavy reliance on the World Bank and other donor partners. So, for example, when I checked, you check, in the beginning of the policy, you will see gratitude to this person, that person, that person. There was just one. The FSP had just one group that was female. There were about 11, about 6 of them were donor partners. There was the World Bank and then government institutions. So in that sense, how do you get gender issues integrated properly into the documents? what were the highlights? So these were the pillars. So governance, they talked about the fact that they were going to have a task force, a government task force to monitor financial inclusion issues, enabling regulations, so the regulation, the legal frameworks to go with it. Capacity building, mainly for the Bank of Ghana and the staff of Ministry of Finance who will be involved in financial inclusion. Market infrastructure, so they get the platforms that we have to be able to make all of those payments online is for this pillar. The fifth one, digital payment use cases, refers to the person to person businesses, government to person, and those kind of businesses. And then we look at support to fintech, which we all know, fintech support. When we apply a GESI lens, we see that in all of the documents, if you start from the Ghana Financial Insight Survey, we see that gender focuses. So in the background, we'll talk about gender and how useful it is and how women are important in the economy and the informal. They say all the nice things, but 85% of the mentions of women happens there. And the rest of it, the documents, when we come to indicators, when we come to implementation plans, monitoring plans, then we don't hear anything about women again. So the indicators, there were 35 of them in the DFS policy, for example, only one. And in fact, it wasn't really something that was helping women. They just said disaggregate the gender by male or female. So yes, financial inclusion is good. I think Momo, for example, security and safety, faster transactions and all of that. So we acknowledge that. Initially, we had the e-levy issues that also disrupted a lot of this. But we also know that women have lower access to all of these platforms. Some work by Pesa White and Jisa, who are also my colleagues at UG, for example, talk about the fact that women are less likely to have access to online platforms. They are less likely to use the internet. They are less likely to have phones. So most of them, they will have the YAM phones, but not smart ones that will enable them to go online. They also are less likely to have money to buy data. So there are all of these issues that are within this so-called financial inclusion that, yes, we've made everything fast and easy, but there are all of these embedded issues that have not been tackled. When we come to them, all of that, and then, I mean, there's a lot of it, we'll come into it very soon. So the highlights. So we have the ITA to modernize agri. So that's kind of like the main policy driving the agri sector in the manifesto and also in the budget. They talk about the fact that they are going to have tree crops. There's going to be a focus on that. There's also going to be a focus on vegetables and the oil palm and processing as well. Livestock, poultry, including restocking the, what's the name? The poultry farm that used to be there at the time, and also expanding in Kokon Kitten, we've heard about all of that. So the poultry sector is also part. And then there's the youth empowerment and irrigation for training, where you look at community land banks to support year-round farming. So these are all very, very good. But these are the things that we have recognized. So we know that they receive only 20% of extension services. We know that people living with disability have special issues, non-literate women, and development. SDG 5, they talk about gender equality and AU Global Goal 17, full gender equality. However, are missing from these economic sectors. It was interesting that you say, okay, we are focusing on them, but the key goals that apply to them are not in the budget. Key goals that apply to them are not in the budget. So, and especially because we know that women are very key when it comes to economic sector targets. And I was looking at it also, just something that was eating me when I was looking at the budget. You see, there's a portion where they look at resource allocation in the 2025 budget. If you check, the Ministry of Gender is the 30th out of the 31st. So I was thinking, is it alphabetical? So I started checking, no, it's not alphabetical. Then when I was looking for some
some information, data on the Ghana Statistical Services webpage. So I went there, then I went to check how have they also placed gender. Over there, they had gender, the Ministry of Gender was the 4th position. So it's not really about how government has arranged it. It's just, does it really, what is the priority? If this is the anchor and you are 30 out of 31, am I really your priority when it comes to that? Okay. So when we look at trade was in, Trump, our favorite president, right? His trade wars has made AFTA very, very relevant now. So we find that we also need, as a continent, we need to start trading with ourselves. But we know that there are issues, access to certification that we need to look at, access to contract, logistics, mobilization. So these are some of the things that we need to ensure that we are tackling in trade when we come to this place. And the policy documents are not even accessible. So how are we tackling accessibility? We need to make sure we are tackling them. And there's an urgent need for this justice-sensitive education, simplified policy languages, just simple pages, just highlights key. What do women need in there? Local languages, opportunities for us to work with. And I think that it's important, when we look at there are different groups of women. So there are people who I know who import like shea butter and all these other shea products, high end, and they are doing well. But because they are small, they are not able to get the volumes. So what are the way forward? Can they begin to form collaborations? So yourself and myself, all of us are exporting shea butter. Can we come together and form something and supply? Okay, and then you put in place proper contracts. But there are also the cooperative models. So the cooperative models to be able to support the volumes. For example, they are not able to come in Kenya. There's this group of ladies, young women. They provide ginger and pepper to Newmont. The Newmont has set up a processing plant in Kenya, and this group of women supports that industry. They provide the raw materials, but as alone they cannot supply, but together they are able to get the volumes that Newmont wants. So for example, their chairperson was talking to me. She said, as I'm speaking with you, the manager is on his way to pick up pepper, which is very helpful. So they're able to get the volumes and they are able to supply. So we should start looking at some of these models, even for small groups. I remember we did some work in Kenya. When we went there, they do avocado exports to the UK markets, to the EU actually. And it's not like people have 100 acres of avocado, no. They were like a group of maybe 20 farmers. Each person has like 20 trees, 30 trees interspaced in their farmlands. And they just had a central packing point. So they come on the days that they have exports. Everybody brings the quantities they have. They pack it. They get one container and they ship. So we have to start looking at models that will help people to move from this micro and go and participate in those other markets where they will get more value for money. And then when we look at financial inclusion, yes, they've talked about the Women's Development Bank. But, the Women's Development Bank was allocated 51 million. If you want when they did all this bank restructuring and all of that, the minimum capital requirement was 400 million. So where does that put the Women's Development Bank? Are they a bank? Are they an MFI? It's really not clear. Yeah. Financial products for seasonal income is also something that we need to look at. So for the Kenya Group, for example, the factory supplies them with the inputs and they deduct it when they are taking their pepper or the produce for them. What kind of models are we going to be using to finance agriculture, trade, and all those kinds of people? And then low literacy levels, persons living with disability, those in the rural areas. How are we also getting them on board? Using cooperatives, simple learning literacy messages for them to be able to understand. And the digital platform must also be inclusive for the users. So I was with this old lady, and when you do the star 170 and you are entering the numbers, I think she was so slow in punching the numbers, then she'll get MMI something. a prompt not working, MMI not working. So eventually she had to call a Momo vendor to come and take money off her phone. So can you imagine the risk and the scams and all of those things that happen just because we are not paying attention? What would have happened, for example, if we had increased the number of the seconds that is required for you to even punch in? Or for English, press 1. You know, using audios for those who cannot see, using all of these other things. It's not like they are very strange technology that we haven't seen before. People are already using them. Why don't we use it to make the lives of persons living with disability, older women, and all these other people much, much easier? The language as well, I think we've talked about that. And then I looked at what are women already using. Women, we know that women are already in the SUSU space. The majority of the village savings and loan, the VSLAs, are women. So these are the places that women are. What do we learn from those people? They are people, they are close to the community. They are really in touch. As for the KYC, they can do all the paperwork. But when you come to the community, they themselves, members of the cooperatives and the FBOs, they themselves, they are the KYC for their members, right? They are close to their clients and they have limited paperwork. So how is the Women's World Banking going to take advantage of that? So I'm saying that it's the conceptualization or the development state of the Women's World Banking. Let's look at the principles where women are already being attended to and use that to feed into what they are developing for us as some of the advocacy things that we'll be doing. In agriculture, I looked at it. Where do we start? We start from where the women are. Women are already in vegetables. And it's understandable because they don't have access to land. You know, vegetable yield per acre is high. You can get a lot from it, even though it's very intense and you have a lot of work. So women are usually in those spaces. How do we ensure? Fortunately, the vegetables are already on the list, right? And then they are into marketing and processing. So, for example, when I spoke with the lady from the Poultry Association, for example, a lot of the women do eggs. Why? Because they sell eggs and they need the eggs. So they are already in that process and they are doing it. Their women are into the oil processing. How do we ensure that somebody who has a contract is able to execute that contract? The next thing is to expand into areas where women are not. So first of all, we start with where women are, then we expand into areas where women are not. How do we do this? We can look at how we can advocate for women to get access to the land banks, good quality. You know, the government is talking about fertilizer and seed. How do we mobilize women to be able to participate in it so that it doesn't become like the PFJ, like peasant farmers were talking about, that women were excluded? And then the persons living with disability and young people. And also, like I said, non-literate, how do we design audio, video kind of education material for them? I had this quote from a couple of the people I talked to. She says, accessing finance is difficult. I'm not strong enough in the market to compete with. So strength, not physical strength, but financial strength. Transporting raw materials to the processing factory so she moves her oil palm to another place to process it. That one alone is money. Before she moves, then she has to take it from Kumasi and then bring it to Accra, the logistics of it. And then she got a contract to supply. But even mobilizing the initial funds to do the supply was a problem. And then another one, the exporters, for example, they talked about that fact that farmlands are being destroyed by estate developers and the people who mine sand. We need better planting materials. Okay, so they were talking about their farm inputs. I think a rep is here. She can talk more about that as well. And then for the young people, we are rounding up now. So we have the National Apprenticeship Program. We've talked about it, 100,000 youth. We have the National Coders, the Jumera, and all of that for young people. So we need to look at what about rural youth? Because youth is not always educated. How do you get rural youth? Somebody who is interested in coding, and I'm in the village. 20% of the country doesn't have lights. I mean, the village, like Patricia was saying, structural issues. 20% doesn't have light. How do we tackle coding in a place where there is no light? We need to look at that. So youth outside the formal education system, some of them, they have the skills in the villages, they are just not educated. How do we have these informal ways of teaching them to do good agricultural practices? And youth in agriculture, like the oil, I think it was the poultry and also the oil palm process, and how to get young people to help them on the farms. And then when we talk about the infrastructure, I think that it's important that as one of your advocacy measures, you look at the fact that they don't just roll out to the whole country. Everybody has 20% completion, 20% completion, because we have a lot of hospitals that have not been commissioned. We have a lot of unfinished projects. So I'm saying that we should roll it out in a modular manner, finish this place, make sure it's working. Before we move, we go here, finish, make sure it's working, so that even if we're able to do 50%, we know that those 50% of things, that infrastructure we have put in place, they are working. And when you train them, we know they want to go out. How about we have all these bilateral collaborations with these people who need them? Or we have, like how the Indians do, they subcontract some of these jobs into their country. They make sure that the infrastructure is there and young people are employed. What we see is they train you. When they train you, then what? So we need to make sure that we have ready sustainable jobs for these people. And so whilst we are rolling out the infrastructure, then we are working on the soft parts that will lead to the employment for them to be able to use the infrastructure. And I think we should also look at effective partnerships with CSOs and private sector organizations that can boost and for them to support mentorship. In conclusion, I would say that gender is often symbolically acknowledged in most of our policies. They have all the big words. Sometimes they leave it out, or sometimes it's in the background how women are important. But when it comes to actually doing the work, ensuring that plans, implementation plans, indicators, and all of those things, like we said, then it's missing. We also have seen that women, young people, and persons living with disability face a lot of obstacles, especially when you're in the rural area and you are older. So it's important that we have to look at these community banks, other inclusive extension agents, and community-friendly things that will support us. It's also important to do advocacy in terms of long-term investments in the young skills, like I also mentioned. And then finally, collaboration with other partners, like I was talking about the poultry, all these other groups of people who have been anchored, like the budget says, all these other groups, we need to make sure that we are all coming together and we speak with a louder voice. So if it's just me, politicians, they see us as votes, right? But if they see like 70,000, 100,000, then they say, okay, this is a whole lot of votes. So let's come together and form the numbers. And we need to have strong monitoring systems. So even as a group, we need to look at the Women's Development Bank, for example. That is a lot of work. It requires a lot of work. Milestones. What did they say they were going to do? Let's develop our milestones. Let's develop our indicators to be able to track the progress that government is making. If they haven't done this by this, then it means by this time, this can't be done. Okay, we need to follow that process. Target groups, make sure that we are inside the target groups, we are included. And participation of vulnerable persons in the process. So even as they are going to start fleshing out the Women's Development Bank or the Agric transformation projects, we need to make sure that we are we are at the table and we are working. So NetRight as a coordination hub, you can look at it to coordinate all the poultry, oil palm, all of these people whose voices need to be heard. And I think that if you do that, you'll be able to get a bigger, louder voice. Because I think that when you go into the sea and you ask the whale to speak for the tilapia, you might not do well. The whale, what's the problem? We have enough food to eat. What they see and what affects them will be very different from what the tilapia is experiencing. So it's important that we make sure that the persons who are supposed to benefit from these policies are, in the beginning, they are part of the discourses that are happening. So on that note, I'll say thank you very much for your time and then open it up for discussions.
And the issues are lumped as cross-cutting. And we know that when we lump Jesse issues as cross-cutting, the specific issues that need to be addressed get lost. And you want to promise us to vote, or when you are in power, you really then put up the needed measures to ensure that all that you say are met. So these are some of the things that we are going to look in the report and see how best this report will come out with practicable and feasible recommendations that we can all work towards achieving. And when she talks about NETRAD being the coordination, it also implies that we have to be It also implies that we have to be inclusive in what we do to ensure that we bring everybody on board. But it's not. We may not solve all the issues today, but at least our contributions will help enrich the report. Before we move into groups, if there are any quick questions, contributions, clarifications, we'll take it. So I'll leave this to Nana to handle, and then after that we'll break for snacks and come back for the group work. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Very good job. And I will start by commending you for. Thank you. As we even, is it just the case of the availability of clear statements of ardent women? Is it about behaviors in terms of implement?
Are doing a lot of work where they have been able to support women to acquire land. What were those best practices? Could we have them listed so that when we take the work, we can look at them and replicate in our various organizations? And there's one other target group I would like us to be intentional in mentioning. These are widows. This is because we know that the women in the workforce are growing, which means their husbands are even older, and the possibility of most of them becoming widows are high. And we know how the land rights are, the cultural rights around land is. Once your husband dies, the land reverts to the family, the widow has nothing. So that's one target group I'd like us to be very intentional in capturing in the report.
Okay,
thank you very much. Sorry I took your spot.
Thank you very much. My name is Lillian. Yes, so thank you for the awesome presentation. So I just want to make some contributions. One has to do with the MSME policy. Okay, so the policy came into being 2020 after NBSSI, National Board for Small Scale Industry, was empowered and then culminated into Ghana Enterprise Agency. So the agency now has been mandated and given the flesh to coordinate all issues on SMEs in Ghana. And in 2023, through their work, they've been able to come out with a classified definition of what MSMEs and large companies are in Ghana. And these information are in the public domain. It's rather unfortunate that you had the difficulty of getting access to the policy. Well, we don't know why that has happened.
Why is it not on the website? Because you see it when you go and then you click it and.
Okay, yeah. So I cannot explain or tell why the issue is. If it's a network issue, I cannot tell. However, I would also want us all here to know that there is a business regulatory reform that is ongoing, and then it is a live platform that is being championed by the Ministry of Trade, Agribusiness and Industry, with support from other stakeholders to include the Registrar General's Department. And this portal has on board a couple of policies, ongoing policies, and then it is live. It calls in for inputs and then suggestions before policies are matured. Then also, I would want to, with the after issue, I know you try to make it lovely as after, yes, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. So the program Ghana is hosting, and I would say that I think women SMEs are doing quite well because because of where I sit, a couple of women were brought on board. They participated in most of the export trade houses in Tanzania and then in Kenya. And then you realize that market access has given them more opportunities, some of them to enhance upon their products and also to increase their clientele space. So one thing, as I'm a woman, so I'm talking as a woman. We are really passionate about us when we are talking about.
It's like a 40-something page document. So if you are doing it in 30 minutes, you will not be able to present all. But if you see the document, there's talk about agri-impact and other people who have done some work, including what she talked about, the women who have been helped, World Bank, FAO, the people have done work. They are in the report. So when you see the full report, you can comment on that, whether you still need us to add more. But yes, they are in the report, what they have done, the women they have supported to participate in after, and all of that is in the report. In terms of, so you see the best practices as well, what they did and the outcomes. So for example, I presented one and I was talking about the fact that AFDB says that there's research to show that when you support persons living with disabilities, so there's that information in the full report. Now let me start with the gentleman. I'm coming, please let me finish answering this. The gentleman talking about the conceptualization. I talked about McPhail, so McPhail and Chikata. They talk about, hello? You are listening, okay. They talk about gender in terms of whether the interventions are gender neutral, gender specific, or gender transforming. So that is what I talk about. So that's why I talked about the fact that if something is gender neutral, you would say that it's not harming the woman, but embedded within those so-called gender neutral policies are a lot of inequalities and the gender specific issues. So we have seen that women do not have access to online platforms. What specific things are we doing to make sure that they have them? And then the third aspect, gender transforming, and that is where we look at structural systemic issues. I think Patricia talked about some of those things. So those are the levels of gender conceptualization for the work that I used. But I will certainly welcome any other interesting ideas to integrate them. And then you talked about the women. So the work by Chikata, for example, she did some work on the education, okay, and she talked about gender issues in it. What she highlights, she says that, first of all, to start, you have to get them in the whole process. So you can't say that right now, if it's gender, they just go to look at the office. Oh, where is the female? There's a gender program, go. Very sporadic kind of interventions. So it has to be holistic. You start from the policy level. When we are drafting the policy, that's why I was suggesting that for the Women's Development Bank, for example, NetRight has to ensure that members here are on that, I don't know, board or whatever it is that they are going to set up. You start from the beginning when you are conceptualizing it. That is where the shark and the tilapia comes in, right? If they are all sharks on the table, oh, these tilapia people, we have food, who cares? You understand? But when the person is wearing that shoe and it's pinching and you are at the table, like my lady said, she's a woman and there are certain things she's passionate about, then the discussion will start from there. Then they will make sure that even when it comes to the interventions, the issues are highlighted. When it comes to the implementation, the people who are even responsible, government agencies that are responsible, then we come to the monitoring indicators, all of those things. Then we have a full, well beefed up representation. Okay, someone talked about best practices and the widows. Okay, I hear you, the widows. And Yes, the MSME, the 2019, the document is 2019, implementation was launched in 2020. And yes.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. Let me make it quick because it's a bit in line with what the first looking at. We are not looking at it in terms of whether a woman is represented, but whether all the Jesse issues have been tackled. Jesse will mean that we are going beyond just putting women as a homogeneous group. And even looking at your Dex review should bring out some of the success stories as was mentioned.
It's in
for
the
us
report,
to, exactly, for us to really know how it's being in traders before we move into the other issues where they need to bring.
I maybe next time Star Ghana should consider breaking
Splitting it up,
so that the work becomes a little bit more manageable. So I really applaud you. And the fact that, I mean, Netrite is reaching out to young researchers in the universities and so on, I think it's very good because it reflects the character of our population, which is essentially youthful. I wondered, and of course we didn't get the report, but I wondered whether you talked a little bit, whether in the literature or in your conceptualization, whether you looked at issues of barriers. Because we live in a country where there are significant barriers. If you take the issue of mining, for instance, I mean, Galamsey, it has a wide implication on land access, access by women to fertile lands and so on. And there is also the whole area of climate change and how it is impacting on the agricultural sector and all of this. So I'm wondering if it is in the report, otherwise maybe you would want to look at it. Then the issue of Jesse, I think significant work has been done by different institutions. So I'm hoping that in your literature, you refer to work that has been done, even for Star Ghana, you know, significant work has been done and we have clear elements of what to consider. So I'm hoping that at least maybe in terms of your annexes, you can attach a sample of how Jesse will look at in these fields. And then I was happy when you had something about long-term investment, which is very critical in relation to those thematic areas of trade, agriculture, and financial inclusion. And some good work is being done, especially with this new way of looking at development processes where you have to look at issues of governance, so the social aspects, and then also the gender and economic aspects. So I think you may want to refer to that. Some of the banks are in the processes of doing some of the things that you have tried to research into. And
the MasterCard funds and all of that.
African Development Fund and all of that. And then after, because of the acronym, but I think it could be a good initiative. And I know that they have done some work around how women who have been predominant in cross-border trade and all of that could be enabled to access the opportunities that are embedded in there. So you can look at some of the protocols that they have developed around supporting women's.
Give such a short-term loan to farmers. So you have to put it in that research findings because it's very harsh about putting farmers on board. Do you think they will come and pick somebody from my village and put on the board in Accra?
No, that's why, no, when I talk about putting on board, I'm talking about like Netrite, for example, speaking on their behalf, for example, So I'll come, there was a hand here first, here, and then I'll come back here. The gentleman, yes, please, from Star, and then this table, and then I'll come back to you.
So mine is likely Sorry. Okay. So mine is largely around the NDC manifesto, and rightly so, because political parties and by default governments are able to implement their manifesto promises regardless of the consultation and all the defects. We do know that the current government has been able to migrate or transition some of the manifesto promises into the current budget. Are you able to also dig further to sort of look at what opportunity exists so that those policies now could be more gender responsive? I mean, we can look at the Women's Development Bank, for example, and some other initiatives that have found their way into the current budget. So it's an area I would want to recommend that probably you also take a deep dive into that. GEA, again, is very key. I mean, GEA and government is doing a lot of things for women in general, including agric and all of that. Somebody talked about the classification. Yes, it is there. So again, it's helpful to look at what GEA currently is, because they contribute to issues around trade and then, of course, agricultural practices, so that we can sort of look at the wider picture and be able to respond appropriately. Yeah.
In the documents, I talk about NEIP, and I talk about GEA and all their initiatives and that they have already done, what they have already done. And then I come to what government wants to do. Government intends to continue with the work that GEA is doing. So if you look at even the one on the youth, for example, is building on what GEA has already done, that government is coming to continue working on. Yeah. The two hands here, and then we'll go to this table. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Let me quickly say, I think by now we should have finished snack break. So we'll take about 3 more. The rest of it, when we get into the groups, please let's talk about it. We are here to take feedback. And then when we are doing the presentation, we can add all the recommendations and things that we want to add to the report. But for now, I'll take the last, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the rest will do. There was a gentleman's hand. 4, 5, and then we'll wrap it up, and then we'll pick it up in the group work. Yes, please, madam.
Okay, let me make it brief. Thank you very much. It was a good one. Capacity building regarding financing of the farmers, the women, because all these microcredits and all that, a lot of them don't even know. I was talking to one lady a few weeks back, and she's like, oh, is there something like that? Can I go to the bank for money? So I think you should look at that.
The education,
capacity building, how the access to these.
Key for rural communities. I know specifically of World Vision doing a lot for women in rural communities. For example, in my community, in the Upper East region, World Vision gave them a whole milling machine to help them with shea butter.
Really seen highlighted in your presentation is the issue of, though the concept note talks about agriculture, so your analysis of the policies, I expected, because of the diverse issues, in trade, agriculture, financial inclusion, to have a breakdown of, because
women are vulnerable.
Yeah, not all.
So
not all.
women are vulnerable. So when we talk about vulnerable groups, women are one of it. So don't.
We have majority are women actually, but we have men who are also even more vulnerable.
Sure.
Some of them. So basically, I was expecting you to go down below in a way that you can actually get strategic needs, and that can bring men.
I totally agree. Thank you. So I'll go. I'm sorry, there are like 50 questions, but we have 5 minutes. So I'll take the hands that were up first, and we will go into group.
For instance, you are targeting women. Maybe let's say the women's bank. You said, okay, well, we were able to fulfill everything based on Jessie, but the women sitting on the bank or sitting on the board of the bank, it doesn't really mean that we can get men in there. Do you get it? So I think that truth
said about barriers.
Barriers, okay.
Because I think one of the things that I see maybe we should put in there is the lack of information. We have all these policies, but across the different divide, across the different stratoscope, who is hearing them? Who knows about them? Because you realize that most of the information is either on the internet, just like you said, or NGOs doing individual. But then when you go down there to the maybe smallholder woman farmer, how are they able to know about these policies that are in there? And I think I'm also looking at the value chain.
Discussion with some 40 students from the Kufuor Scholars. We went from Ghana to Nigeria, Badagry. From Semeboda to Badagry, there were 49 barriers. 49. And you want me to send my shea butter to Nigeria to sell. So I did mention it, but I like the climate and galamsey part. I'll complement that argument with these other things.
Okay, lastly, I think most important for me is the inputs that you mentioned. Because I think key for me is these mechanization centers that are being put up. I think you should mention it. Because for us, for instance, this season, we had to go around earlier on looking for inputs.
Yeah.
Tractor centers and all those things for the women to farm. So it's very important.
For 15 minutes and the snack break, I think we should first break into the groups first so that we know the groups that we're going to. Then straight after our snacks, we go directly into the groups. So we'll start counting 1, 2, 3 from this table. No. Oh, okay. Yeah, so 1. Yeah.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Auntie Rose.
How's the baby?
She's fit. She said the way we
But so bad at it. Is it the baby? Is it the
because she's almost.
I'm sorry.
Financial inclusion. Three. How many people work on trade? So if we say that those that we'll realize that all the participants will agree. So we are going to work with the one who's trade number. Yeah, so I'm saying that we are going to work with that number because I understand those in So, Cynthia, so one is for which? Trade. Trade is 2, and financial inclusion is 3. So we have to join tables. Please let's join this table. So all one will be here. All one will be here. Yeah, all 2 here. So we can either join the table so we move and then all 3 here. Please can we move into the groups and start working? Can we share the documents? All 1 here, all 2 here, all 3 here. Please can we move into the groups? Start the over. Bring your food to your food. Bring your snack to your plate. And let's start working. No pressure. Push with it. Go here. And 3 and 1. Table so you can do it. In the you can 3 hash points. So this is 1, this is 2. How many minutes do you have? We have 30 minutes. What's the time now? This time we move before I go quickly. If we want to live here and let's do it. Please, let's go. Hey, that is wonderful. Open the door. Please, if you are not in the group, don't go there. The guy is here.
Do we read so that we can all?
So it will just be skimming through because it's quite
So what is required of us? He's giving us this. He says, so what are we expected to do?
Which should be added to the recommendations that are provided.
So please, for us to be can we read? Can I read it?
It's going to be a long one.
How many? We have 45 minutes. So if we get
we can do what
when we get here, we just look at them. Okay.
So maybe we should start from the highlights. This is the context.
Exactly. The highlights. Yes. So policy highlights: National Financial Inclusion and Development Strategy. The NFIDS introduced in 2015 sought to increase financial inclusion from 58% to 85% by 2023 based on 5 pillars: financial stability, access to service infrastructure, customer protection, and financial literacy. Although women were recognized as part of the vulnerable groups, there were no clear plan for their inclusion in the action points or policy outcomes in the document. The Cash-Lit Road Program, launched with support from the Better Than Cash Alliance, aimed to reduce cash transactions and promote digital payments. However, like the NFIDs, it did not address the specific financial needs of women in the informal economy. Although the program mentioned increasing digital infrastructure in rural areas, its primary concern was integrating the informal economy into the tax net, which often burdened women and additional financial obligations. The Digital Financial Inclusion Policy was launched in 2020 alongside the Cash-Lit Road Map. The DFSP was designed to create an inclusion financial ecosystem, concentrating on private sector involvement and digital payment systems. While the policy initially mentioned the importance of a gender-sensitive approach, as noted, applying a gender lens to the implementation of this policy will be critical to advancing women's financial inclusion. This focus did not translate into policy pillars. The 6 pillars. The pillar includes actions that provide dialogue among stakeholders within government. It seeks to establish a task force at the Ministry of Finance to work with counterparts in other government ministries, departments, and agencies to implement government actions and ensure buy-in by relevant stakeholders. So that's the first one. I think we didn't number it. So, but the MD is.
So we had on the previous page. Okay.
Governance. That's governance.
Yes. So
governance. Yes. So governance. So second was enabling regulation. Should I read the details or I should enable? So tax targets the role of payment systems and acts concerning e-money as well as KYC, that's know your customer, from individuals. It pays attention to customer protection, providing information to customers and access to recourse mechanisms. It also envisages under this pillar is deposits. Is deposit protection through the Deposit Protection Act, digital insurance service, sharing of DFS data, and national competition laws to promote competition among key players. So the third one is capacity building. Capacity building in this regard is for the Bank of Ghana, data protection provision, especially in DFS related data. This is expected to support financial inclusion. For instance, loans can be provided using digital addresses, monitoring the extent of cash in, cash out networks. And the digital payment uses cases. Digital support uses cases, identifies with small value information, small value informal pension, person to government payments, and creates incentive for the use of digital payments like e-levy, digitalization of payments of public amenities like water, electricity, payment of health premiums, pensions, remittances. It also includes agricultural value chain payments, smarter meters, and small value payments for pensions to governments. Then support financial fintech. Finally, the policy supports assessment to fintech environment and fintech startups, especially through National Entrepreneurship Innovation Plan. It's also committed to development of harmonized approach to sandboxes. The government will also give priority to fintech-based payment solutions for government to person and government to business payments. So gender and social inclusion.
So this is where it starts. Okay. Somebody.
This one portion.
Somebody should relieve you. Let me relieve you a little for the next two paragraphs. You must be tired. Okay. So gender and social inclusion lens. The timelines for this policy elapsed in 2023. However, there is no clear document that assesses the performance of government strategic actions. The DFSP, introduced in 2020, was designed to create an inclusive financial ecosystem, concentrating on private sector involvement in digital payment systems. While the policy initially mentioned the importance of a gender-sensitive approach, this focus is not consistent in the document. The document has portions of actions and indicators where gender is conspicuously missing. Rather, there is a focus on benefits to businesses and government institutions with limited consideration for the specific needs of females and other vulnerable groups. With 6 pillars noted and 35 indicators developed, only one had some gender relevance. That is gender split for digital payments, broken down by digital payment instruments. A word search in the DFS notes limited mentions of the word woman and female in the background sections of the document. After this, the gender lens was cast. Similar to the other 3 policy documents, though, the background talks about using a gender lens. This is not seen in practice. Here again, there is a symbolic use of gender in the document with no corresponding material actions. Government initiatives like the formation of a task force, biometric identification systems, websites like Ghana.gov, and electronic payment systems are quite gender neutral and have no way of responding to GESI needs if specific measures are not taken. While activities under digitalization may have simplified transactions for individuals, businesses, and the government to make payments, it housed several challenges. The e-levy, a tax on digital financial transactions, was implemented, and women, especially in the informal sector, faced more difficulties. The levy raised the cost of accessing digital financial services and disproportionately impacted women, especially small-scale traders. Removal of the e-levy, therefore, came with much excitement among the populace. Certainly, digital finance has changed the way financial services can be accessed and tracked, with mobile money standing out as the most widely used, making transactions quick, convenient, and reducing the need for traders to carry money around. According to news reportages, Ghana has the fastest growing mobile money market in Africa, and mobile money platforms reached over 3 trillion Ghana cedis in 2024. Jobs have been created for young persons through the increase in the number of Momo users, increasing Ghanaians working as mobile money agents to over 500,000. However, MADA vehemently disagrees, noting that financial inclusion neither facilitates development outcomes nor benefits the poor. Indeed, the difficult circumstances which mobile money vendors face are not adequately captured, while digital financial services are beneficial to female traders because, among other things, it affords them the opportunity to travel without cash, reducing the risk of armed robbery. The government usually claims of the benefits. The cash light, for example, notes benefits to the government as the informal economy will be captured in the tax bracket. When one looks at tax
be able to solve problems amicably. Yes. So I don't know.
It makes sense to zoom into the recommendations.
Yes.
Because it looks like we rather exhausted half of our time.
Exactly. They are bringing us mics.
I thought we had a long
Yeah. So that one, the recommendation. One is here. Yes. So the recommendations. Oh no, you can share. It's just 3. The recommendations too is very long, so I'm just saying we go to the summary. The summary says there's a summary. So yes. Yes, so the recommendation, I think a male should read. Yes, so we can start from here. Yes,
So collaboration with other partners is crucial for the success. Apart from feedback and NGOs, let's include the Center for Employment of Persons with Disabilities, who have worked with farming corporations to develop accessible sessions and inclusive farming technologies such as raised garden beds for women and wheelchairs. According to CEPD, these interventions help increase productivity and self-confidence of over 500 women in rural areas. Another effort is Agri-House Foundation's Women in Food and Agricultural Leadership Training Program. And Gold and Soil Awards. Since its launch, the World Fabric has trained over 8,000 women in agribusiness, including women with disabilities. Topics covered include financial literacy, leadership, and agri-tech. According to Agri-House, 25% of women who went through the program have gone on to start or expand their businesses.
So they said how many women were trained? 8,000 women. And if just 25% of the women that were trained have been able to, move on and start their own. Yes. So that means not even 1%. Then what happens to the 75%? I think that's a question we should answer. So that's still a big issue to look at. If you are talking about 800,000, 25% of 8,000, 25%, that means it's less than 1,000 people. Yes, that's then. Yes, so the question will be, so 2,000. Yes, so that means that 3/3. Why aren't they able to? To use what you have, build them up when it comes to capacity. Because in the presentations, I think I heard someone mention capacity building. The fact that most of the women don't have the skills, financial literacy and others. But if they've been able to train 8,000 people, and still you have below half of them implementing what you have taught them, then there might be underlying issues that will be affecting them, and not particularly just the fact that they don't have the capacity to do what you are training them.
Okay. G what? Oh, Ghana Enterprise, okay.
The women and they don't take the money. family. Yeah. Yeah, but I also, yeah. So that will boil down to mindset. Yeah, mindset. Okay. Any other thing?
But when it comes to credit, generally, credit always starts with two things from both the receiver and the giver. From the receiver point of view, on all microcredit programs I have worked on, do the receiver know, understand, and ready to use the loan for its intended purpose?
Okay. So the credits, I'm coming.
The intended purpose for the credits, that's the receiver. Is the receiver, does he know and is willing to use it for its intended purpose? Look, a lot of people go for credits with differences in mind.
Yeah.
Let me tell you first, my sector, water and sanitation. People go for sanitation loans. They don't have toilet in their house. The loan is to build toilet. They collect the money, they won't use it for toilet building. So that's the number one.
Yeah. Shift, yeah. Very important.
Yeah. Exactly.
For what?
Give us a bit more
information on, so that we can.
And recommendations. There's an aspect that deals with the credit. Banks and credit providers need to develop loan schemes that are flexible and designed for the reality of young farmers. Looking at interest rates, the timelines, language used, the paperwork required.
To be able to know what is useful for you, for us to advocate on and get done, like actions. You are here, so I'm not happy. Like practical.
So that is
things.
what I'm saying right now.
Practical things from your end, from the institutions here. What are the practical things that we can use that to do the advocacy to make sure that your firm, your institution's agenda is also being supported. So I'll appreciate that you put in those practical things for us, then we can roll it out in the advocacy.
So I'm saying that the production of goods, the selection of government in terms of cash crops, they should relook at it to include local indigenous foods in terms of health and then food security within our local communities.
Please, have you been able to capture
food security across local?
To ensure food security in the country or across the country or local communities.
How government will ensure food security across the country?
Government should relook at the food crops that have been selected and are being promoted. The priority. Yes, yes. I'm saying that because we realize that most of the products that are coming, a few of them are not really indigenous to us. We didn't know the knowledge of schools, protecting our indigenous foods and promoting food security. Lastly, for instance, the northern region, during hunger, we rather go more, because we don't have maize and everything, eat more vegetables. But now those vegetables are not even produced again because everybody's planting soya bean. Government says we should produce soya bean to get more money. Pardon? But what it is, but we are planting more soya bean to the detriment of. That is my thought. So what I'm saying is that they shouldn't only promote those cash crops, but also look at the local indigenous foods.
I want to add value addition. Like to promote value addition among women, farmers, along the agri-business chain. Because value addition is one we are also looking at as a country. When you export your raw materials, you don't get enough. But you add on value, the price goes up. You are able to regulate it from your activities.
Yes, it's another point.
That was the point I wanted to make on the. You see, she had women crops, right? Codes. One, you see our women farmers are poor, and it's the women crops that are very high, still very high chances of going bad once they are produced, because they are in that category. So if there's anything we can do, what are the technologies we can propose to make sure we are safeguarding these crops when the women produce them, so they don't lose so much at the end of the day after putting in so much resources into their production. So that's one point I would like us to look at. Either any forms of technology or any help we could give these women in the women crop area. First, we are saving them the heartache of producing with that market. We are saving them loss of income because the things go bad at a production.
So the
Auntie, did you write?
value addition, encourage women. So the government manifesto talks about agribusiness. But agribusiness has been the system, so it's nothing new. But the emphasis on this particular agribusiness is producing raw materials for the industry, looking at contract parameters in this sector. So I'm trying to think around
This, in terms of the criteria that is used to pick, they are the ones that go lower, but then they are also the ones that exact a lot from the women. You understand what I'm saying? Then, when we talk about this mechanization, I think I spoke about it. For that one, I am very passionate about it. Because you say you are promoting, yes, we will produce for you. But to even get a tractor to go and farm a woman's land or someone's land, it does not exist. We had to go around before this thing, around being just trying to look for tractors and say these are our women groups, we have the money, we'll pay. Meanwhile, government says we have mechanization centers. Lastly, I think in terms of again under inputs, okay, can we get labor reducing inputs at a cheaper rate, like I don't know, for the women? Because if I imagine there are these handheld planters, one is 2,800 Ghana cedis. If we do a research, you realize that it is mostly the men who are buying it, and our women are still bending to plant. So these are
very important.
inputs. Government, I don't know. So
I don't know. I think it can come under trade facilitation measures by Madam, trade facilitation measures for women.
Earlier, I was making a point to the fact that they need to include a section on what is working. What are people doing that is working? And from where I'm coming from, in the project we just ended, BSLAs are working. The banks will not give you the money, but within your small BSLA, you can raise funds among yourselves that they are not even able to borrow all of it at a go. You go to a village in the Hatlet, in the Boko, where there are only two, deep in there in the forest, they have BSLA groups that are raising 60,000, 120,000.
That's a lot of money for such groups.
Exactly. So if we know what is working, let us
how can we leverage? I agree with you.
Take it to skill. Take all the things that are working to skill, and let's have it.
That's for financial.
Yeah. So some of the issues are cross-cutting. For the woman in trade, she also needs financial.
Yeah.
So what you talking about, like interventions that are available, but women are also to access
So Ministry of Information should be included in all these things.
Can you please do a quick run through something that I've written? We can read and share, and then I think a lot of these issues. If you can read, that's my crazy handwriting.
She said interministerial.
So you read some
collaboration. Yes.
Sometimes. I've never heard a female version.
No, but when it comes to these things, government institutions are mandated to do certain things. So as you just mentioned, Ministry of Agric is for the women in trade something, women in something, women in agri. That's what they call it. And you also have the women in trade and trade facilitation and all that. So it's a coordination bit that works for us because we have to work together.
Another advocacy point. One advocacy point I think we can look at getting the things closer to the point of contact. I'm saying that again on our podcast.
That we are talking about is that's because many women have the challenge of
post-harvest losses, so we suffer a lot of these
where they stop it. That's for me to do with trade. And then we have not tried something to market access.
Markets are very important. But we should be wrapping up on the gaps.
I like the use of the squeezing.
They don't pay competitive prices for it. They squeeze them and come and make all the profits. So capture is also under market access.
So market squeezing.
No. You mentioned market access.
Market access. Access to market. That is how women can get access. Unfair.
Bargaining power. It's power.
That's the right way to say.
I should reject the market access.
No, it's a point under market access. It's a point under
The market unfair trade practices by
WIGO, yes, women in informal sector.
Into informal. Majority of the traders women are informal, and they are into petty business in Nigeria border. So if she's counting that number of barriers along from Semetu. It was all part of it. Okay.
So when I know there are protocols and
It was all part of it. Okay.
So when I know there are protocols under negotiation, hopefully that's what the negotiation. Hopefully that's what the presidents are saying. That's go from Ghana. Go to Nigeria.
To Benin.
Yeah. So it's
from means from Benin to Nigeria alone, 40 something. You can imagine. 40 something barriers.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have written out the things. I'll hand them over to you, but let me read so that we all understand. One of the things, so the very first issue I raised is about informal sector neglect. The majority of informal trade is dominated by women, especially in cross-border and petty trading. So we need the trade policies. I said trade policies often neglect this sector, exposing women to harassment and bribery, insecurity at borders, and lack of social protection. And the second gap I raised is inadequate trade facilitation measures for women. So one, the border barriers, the procedures, the custom systems often poses difficulties in mobility and safety needs of women traders. These do not take into consideration gender-sensitive infrastructure, such as the safety of the transports, the sanitation at borders, as well as women-friendly trade hubs. And then Aisha raised the fact that we need facilitation in terms of giving access to mechanized tools and implements for women. And then the third gap I've identified is skills and information gap. So we have trade policies rarely providing for capacity building tailored specifically for women. So women lack information, she raised it, women lack information on trade regulations, standards and opportunities. And women lack information also on digital skills and access to e-commerce platforms or how to navigate export procedures. So I made two recommendations on regional and international trade agreements and policies should include binding gender provisions. So for example, enforcement mechanisms to ensure gender impact assessments, gender disaggregated data, and monitoring of women's
May I add one point? Okay. I'm not so much into agri, so it'll be quite difficult. I'm giving a practical
Yes, we're trying.
She can help us deliver for good. She's the chair.
No, she will be.
Fine. No, you will. The way you practice
make your point.
Well, let me just add this.
We have how many minutes?
She recommended partnership.
You see, you didn't give us the document before. Now we are doing a thorough work for you, and you are still giving
Now we have 5 minutes.
Can you read transporters? Government should look at partnering with them because, for instance, when there is the tomato we normally neglect the transporters.
I think harmonizing what she's writing and what I've written will be. That's why I gave it to her so that she can.
Yes.
I'm not sure what she has. So there will be a gap.
Please, may I raise my point?
She has a point. She has a point.
I have a point. I don't really know how to couch it, but I think that if we could increase the market value of whatever the women are trading.
Adding value addition.
Okay.
There was a point.
Market value as in the market value.
The pricing or?
No,
or
the product in itself, because the processing. And I don't want us in a situation that we will always have to transport the goods from the villages to Accra or to Tema before we can process them. So let's say the factory that is doing very well with the coffee juice is very good because it's in a rural area, not so much in
close to the raw material.
Yes.
So it reduces losses.
Yes, and then so that the women will not be incurring losses just transporting the commodities to other.
Let her capture this point.
So
I mean the secretary.
So if in that case, if I'm into agriculture, I have a farm.
So it's not actually the factories that are not there. It is what we are being produced. That because for example, the tomato that is being produced there,
that's
the watering.
Okay.
Yes. And so if you can process a whole room and you get just a bucket. But the kind of tomatoes that is used for tomato paste is the different issue. So yes. So probably.
So in terms of value, maybe
there should be R&D.
It should rather be on the pricing.
What is R&D?
Rather on the pricing for the issues she raised about market trends.
Research and development on crops.
Yes.
So maybe that value should rather be about that one and not the value.
Like it's in line with the value addition.
Yeah, so the Queen Mother raised the question. They sit in the villages. These conferences we are talking about, do they have access to those kind of opportunities?
No. Tell you what they went to learn. Because you realize that they'll nominate the people, they will go and they come and sit on the information. But we can't also move from here.
Exactly, all the way every time. We can't even get the resources. We won't get the resources.
No, thank you. That is where it boils down to. We have the Ministry of Information. What is their role?
And they have to be manageable in all areas so that they disseminate the information correctly. Ministry of Information to be working closely with. You have to send the information to the Johnson. We'll give you the
Okay, let me write my number for
we'll
you.
give it to you.
Write the group's number and then you write the trade or
Information
I'll do what I can do.
should be at the grassroots, shedding light on government information.
Write out your number and I don't write anything.
Alright, roommates, have a fruitful
But I didn't hear anything about it, how the youth can also get involved in this.
You should also raise it. So raise it.
You can only hear their interest.
So in fact, me like projects. So the projects establish about 30 projects. So the projects establish about 36 factories across districts. And the purpose, it's a model from districts. And the purpose, it's a model from the Kenyan experimented it and worked well for them. So experimented it and worked well for them. So the purpose was to establish rights and all that. And now they are supposed to work with these youth groups initially who were to own the factories. Because that's how the government got the land. Government told them that they are going to build factories for them. So the lands were given. Yes. So now these youth groups, some of them who can become part managers of the companies would be employed, and those others will go into raw material production. So if the factory is to process ginger, now monies are being given
But also
to them.
your presentation is ready.
Okay, please.
So,
I just want to
because
add
you
this.
represent it.
I just want to add this to you see, I think that it's best time that we commend the traders who actually trade in our crops and our raw materials. Yes, comment, because we always have best farmer. Each year we host events.
Some incentives.
Yes, we give them incentives. Exactly. We should have something like a best trader. Somebody who is, no, if we make it a competition, there will be somebody who just wants to win a prize, put in the effort and do that.
You wouldn't even know what about something. There's one person that
Pardon?
Don't give it to the market.
There's a lot of money. So we shouldn't go there.
When you are going to start, it requires somebody to even show you to so you realize that only middle age people who are going to so that rather than you can, because if you look at you
go with
so the criteria also counts. So before somebody goes into agric, then maybe you are middle age. You've got some advanced knowledge, and then you have some money still somewhere that you can pump into the venture. Because agric, you go into it, you won't get your money there and then as it is. So that meanwhile, criteria and BBR doesn't even favor that person who wants to go into it. So the criteria, it's just a general thing.
He has another point.
Kenyan experience.
Yes.
She came up and said, if we have ideas about what others are doing, we should talk about them. So if you have...
I know. GA. Formerly NBS.
Please, you are listening.
Other life.
I registered with you.
Yeah,
Are we done?
You are now talking.
To listen to other people. If we can quickly in a way that it will be presenter friendly, so that we listen to it, and if we have to add something.
Are they giving us flip charts? We
Oh
didn't
no,
take them.
she'll collect the papers. That's why she asked us to number this.
They do.
Is it a question you are asking,
You are asking
or is a
or-
statement you are making?
We have national coordinating office.
Yes.
After then at the national, yeah, that's what the national there is. I don't know. Yes, I don't know of it.
But I didn't get a question. If
So we
there's
should raise a question which we can find out. If it's not there, we can recommend.
Desk for women in trade and agriculture or agribusiness at the national at the national coordinating office of AFTA.
But check from your colleagues and see.
No, so we asked that question here, and they add it as part of our recommendation.
No, I'm not saying she's the one. I'm saying find out if already you don't have anything like that. Okay, you are working with the trade.
So recommend.
Because for us in Japan, we have a dedicated desk for women.
Okay.
We call it the She Trade.
She.
A cross-cutting.
So write that. But
Right, it's not. It shouldn't be cross-cutting. It should be a standalone.
So we also talked about food security across the government for just
as and when it becomes necessary.
Collaboration on women issues.
Yeah, women in trade. Say yes, specifically we are looking at
women in trade. Yeah.
Issues. Oh, women in
Ministry of Trade and Gender.
And any other institution
Foreign Affairs.
Okay, so we have assistants should come close to the point of contact. That's those doing the supply and then those bringing the things on board. I think we have to get closer to the exit point where they can just produce and they have
Thank you. So give me an idea.
It's not too clear, but then assistants should come.
Assistants should come close to.
We are wrapping up.
No, take it out if it's not clear. It doesn't speak to you. So clear. Take it out.
And then we have market access. Market access, we talk about how women can get access to.
Sorry?
We talked about market access.
Yes.
How women can get access to the foreign market and then the local.
By engaging the right people.
Just wait a minute. Oh, I would have loved to hear trade and agric and then financial inclusion, because it's so trade and agric. Who is ready? Agric, please come. Let's clap for the agric group.
Number of them that come out successful is very low. For example, the project that was organized by Wafa Greek trained 8,000 women, and only 25% of them were able to establish their own businesses and still do something related to what they were trained in. So the first thing we did as a group was to look at the root cause of this. We've been given the training, we've been given grants, but why is it that just 25% of them have been able to use the knowledge and the money to become something profitable? And these were some of the things we came up with. The first thing that we realized was the mindset of these women. Most of them see money that's given to them for farming activities from NGOs and VSLAs as money they have to spend and spend for free. So we think that women should be educated more on financial management and financial literacy to be able to give them the opportunity to use these grants properly. Also, we realize that sometimes the women are given the money wholly and they are not able to use the money accordingly as they should in their farming activities. So we came up with a formula that women should be given support in packages. So if the woman needs money for a whole farming season, why not get an intermediary or someone who is an anchor? What the person will be doing is that the person will be facilitating the woman's farming activities. So first of all, she needs inputs. Instead of giving the money to her, go and buy the inputs, to use the credit facility for the intended purpose. These are some of the things we should outline and have at hand before we hand over any grants or credit facilities to these women. We also looked at a policy that we are hoping to be implemented well, and we looked at how well this policy can be implemented. That is the Women Development Bank. So we are seeing that now it is the policy for women that we can actually point out to as it stands now. We were looking, the Women Development Bank is supposed to operate like a PFI, just like DBG, and therefore it's not going to directly release credit facilities to farmers or women in rural areas who are farming. It's going to liaise with other institutions or other existing banking institutions to give out credit. And therefore, we are thinking most of the women in agric are found in rural areas. Then you ask yourself, what are the financial institutions that are best situated to be able to handle this credit facility? Then we give it back to rural banks, because in as much as there are farmers in Accra who have access to Absa Bank, Cal Bank, there are also farmers in my village who have never heard of Absa Bank and Cal Bank. And therefore, we are thinking that the Women Development Bank should be decentralized to focus on rural banks and rural credit facilities that will be able to get in touch with these farmers, evaluate whatever thing they are doing, and be able to come up with something tangible at the end of the day. Also, we are thinking that the Women Development Bank should also look at benchmarks. We have a lot of VSLAs that's working in the agricultural field, helping women in various and diverse ways. We think that if they use these benchmarks, it will help them to be able to get the structures that they already implement that is working well, and those that is not working well, so that they will revise it to bring a holistic structure for this facility. We are also thinking that in as much as is a government policy, is going to be politicized, right? So you give 1,000 cedis to a woman in a village, and you struggle for her to pay because she will say that, I work for the NDC, so if they give me 1,000 cedis, they shouldn't be pestering me to pay. That's my side of the campaign I did for them. So you give 1,000 cedis to a woman and an example a colleague gave was their shaman lands. This land was given out. People were built in terms of capacity, giving grants to farm on this land. But when you go there today, it's a huge mess. So we looked at some of the things that caused this and how it can be eradicated. So one of the things we realized when we were reviewing the document was that government is now trying to do community land banks, where at a community you are supposed to have a land where you tilt and farm. You are supposed to have a land where you tilt and farm. And we think that if this is well implemented, it will really help, because at the end of the day, when it comes to ownership of lands, where as a woman, if you own a lot of, when it comes to ownership of lands, where as a woman, if you own a lot of lands or a lot of farmlands, you are seen as someone who don't respect men or someone who is moving out of the normal women behavior. And as a result, some women have to move to men for them to buy lands for them, and at the end of the day are exploited. So we are thinking that there should be a policy around women having to own land and own it and use it for agricultural purposes freely and fairly. The last thing that we realized was that in all this, you need partnerships for the goals. That's SDG Goal 17 talks about partnerships, and we've seen that in some communities, women come together, get technology that is high above you, the individual, getting it for your own farm, bringing the technology into the community, and the technology has to do all the work for a group of women, maybe 10. For example, the maize grill, I myself have seen it that some communities, they have 15 farmers. Alone, I cannot bring the maize grill to my community. But the maize grill comes for maybe 2 days, it stays there, and it does the work for all the people in the community. And that brings down the cost. So we think that partnerships and grouping for farming activities and agricultural activities will really help. A summary of our recommendations is that first, to ensure sustainability, political components of policy should be taken out. Second, because VSLS mostly operates in a project nature, they have a time limit and a budget to deal with. So even after their activities, there should be someone in the community, someone in a government position that would look and evaluate these programs to ensure that they bring out the success and the intended purpose and objective. Also, shifting the mindsets of farmers and agricultural people to see farming as a business and not as a way to feed yourself seasonally. And also, we realize that before you even go and give a grant to a community, you should first of all prepare the minds of those receiving the grant, right? Let them know that this money is facility education. They should not just be people who are following their women out, but they should also advocate for women to use their credit facilities and use it well. Thank you.
Thank you. We've heard the Agree Group, but you think you are living without questions. Me, I have plenty of questions here. So please, any question? First from the group, do you have any additions? Something that you discussed that she did not mention. From the two groups, please ask questions. It doesn't mean that when you present, we'll ask you a question. Please ask questions. Are you sure you listened to the presentation? Yeah, please, any contribution? Please put the, have that? There's none there. Let's put this there. Will it work? Do you have one?
No, what I said was to commend them. I think it's a good presentation. I don't have a question, but I'm impressed, and she's very articulate.
Any other contribution? Or questions, clarification? Okay.
I had already mentioned this to Doc earlier, but I wanted us to, as part of the recommendations that she made from the report, I was asking if she can highlight the role of WIAD, the Women in Agric Development, because it's one of the very key institutions that has been established at the Ministry of Food and Agriculture to deal with issues that specifically affect women. So this is just my add-on.
Okay, thank you. Any other? So first, you did mention about the mindset of the women, is that when they give the money to them, they should spend and so on. So my question is, do you also discuss whether before the monies are given to them, a needs assessment is done to ascertain whether what they need is the money or not, or for them to understand why the credit is being given. Because I remember this morning.
Recommendations, we mentioned that community-based initiatives should be participatory. In as much as we know that the issue of GETC in agriculture is huge, it's like a wicked problem, right? People come, they just touch a bit of it and go. But there are underlying issues. Yes, so we realize that they do need assessment to realize that, okay, these women need maybe this amount to support them. They give the money to you, but you also have a husband who needs money, right? You also have children who have to go to school. So we realize that the issue lied with the fact that, first, they are not educated so much on how to actually manage the money they've been given to. So they've given you the money to farm for this season. That's fine. They do evaluations and all that. But how participatory is it? Right? That came down to the mindset. The fact that they get the money, but they see that it's money. I have to use it to expand my business, but I don't owe anyone because they've given the money to me. So whatever I use the money for, at the end of the day, I can be held accountable, but nothing can really be done to me. So it brought us down to the mindset. And even in the presentation, we mentioned the processes that you have to follow before you give them this money. As he said, we expect that before you give it out to them, outline the things you need. So first of all, let the person understand what exactly the money should be used for. And we saw that giving them the money is not an option because some people, just like you go to school, some people study on their own, some people have to be forced to study, and some people it will never work. It's the same like dealing with women who are into agriculture and providing them finances.
So it's not just about this money, I won't account to anybody, so I have to use it. That's why I'm using it. There may be underlying causes. Maybe you are giving me money, but at that point, maybe it wasn't money that I needed. Maybe I needed financial literacy training to know how best to manage it. Maybe there was another need that I would have needed the money for. So it's also important to look at those aspects, and we don't just make it a general statement that as for women, when you give in agriculture, when you give them money, those who want to work will work, those who don't want to work, something that is money meant for you, so I will use it. There are underlying causes that we need to explore to better understand the issues before interventions are developed.
Thank you very much, Patricia, for that explanation that you have provided, because I was getting very worried. But because we have Patricia as the facilitator, she has clarified. I think one of the things we have to be very mindful of is that women everywhere, whether they've been to school, whether they've never been to school, they know exactly what they want. Even we, who claim to be educated and we are working, maybe we are working in offices, in organizations, sometimes we also mess up with resources, given the circumstances we may find ourselves in. So one of the cardinal principles of working with women and making sure that you're addressing GESI issues is being respectful of the people. Because right now, if you go into the communities, a lot of people are educated though. The population has changed and the socioeconomic background is also changing. So people know that if they don't use the money judiciously, they can fall into trouble. But we all know the situation, the hardship we are all going through, and how we ourselves, even those of us who are in the cities, our own money that we are managing, how we are not able to manage because of the situation we find ourselves in. So please, let us not see the women in the agri sector or in the communities as other. They are not other, they are us. And as Patricia rightly said, there are reasons why monies may be used judiciously or not judiciously.
The other issue is about the Women's Development Bank. I think some of the questions, and I'm not saying you should respond to it, but some of the issues that we should also, or questions that we should ask ourselves is, do we need a Women's Development Bank, or do we need to strengthen existing commercial banks to be able to cater for women's access to credit? Because there is the Women's Bank, World Banking, that collapsed. So what are the lessons? Why did it collapse and all that? These are things that we need to also think through to see if there are, even if there would be a Women's Development Bank, what lessons are we bringing? What lessons are we bringing from the Women's World Banking to ensure that if this bank should be established, it doesn't repeat the mistakes of the Women's World Banking? Yeah, Nana.
I wanted to add that even in the commercial banks, they have the women's desks. From November 2024, the Bank of Ghana gave a directive that each of the banks should have a women's desk. And so there are 23 of them. They all have these women's desks. So what are we also doing with these women's desks in those banks, and how are they linked to the
Women's Development Bank? And really, do we need Women's Development Bank, or we need to? Yeah. Please, there is a, yeah. Please put it on.
Okay. I think the Women's Development Bank is very essential because it also allows the government to mob specific funding for women. Unfortunately, our banks do not discriminate between the same lending conditions, even for women. They even tighten the requirement. It is only ABSA Bank that is giving some loans to women-led businesses at a very, very good rate. Even that money was being given to the ABSA by MasterCard. The Ghanaian banks they are not charitable, let me put it that way, to consider women and lower when others men can take it and pay higher interest.
Please, can we listen to him?
So somebody said that if a goat is on its knee begging for something, you know, say that you've reserved it for a sheep which is asleep. And so until Bank of Ghana requires banks to grant women-led businesses up to, let's say, 30% of their lending portfolio, banks will not comply and they will do what will make them make money. Thank you.
So how do we get or make banks to comply with provisions? Yeah, provisions that directives that are given by the central bank. Did I see a hand here?
Yes, the point was made by him, but I just wanted to say that what Doc raised, the issue about the existence of women desks at banks, will not be the same as having a women's bank, which is dedicated, to women. Also with the seed money being provided from the states, which will likely be impacted by policy as we're trying to also advocate for. So like he mentioned, the rate at which the women will be given credit will not be as the commercial banks because it's competitive. At the commercial bank, it's competitive. There are no considerations that this is a women-led business or this is a petty trader. So let's make sure the rate is a bit friendly. But when we have something implemented that is really tailored for the women, then we can, especially when it's led by government and it's not private sector, then we can make advocacy in terms of policy on how the rates should favor women. And then also the issue about the commercial banks having desks, I'm not sure how the information is out there, especially in our rural communities, how information is available to women, whether those places are there and they are actually accessible to them, as whether they are aware is also another issue. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Madam.
Yeah, thank you. About the women and banking, the education is not there. So some of us who might be reading from the media that, oh, this bank is helping with this. When we go, the impediments that are on the way, you don't even have to go near. Whose land are you using? Your father has no land. And you are supposed to bring land to back your security. Yeah. So me like this, my father has land, nobody is farming. The men are not farming. That's why I've taken it by force. So like last year, I gave out 50 acres for the women to do their group farming. Unfortunately, because of the climate change, we lost 50 acres to drought. So supposing we've taken any money from any bank, me, I can sleep and sleep. But then, what will have happened? So we're pushing for irrigation also, but up to now, for the past 8 years, we've not had that irrigation access. That the government should help us with irrigation at all, up to now. This year is another year. We're going to start again from July. Whether it will rain or it will not rain, we don't know. So the women going for banking, going for loans, they are even scared. And if you have 5 acres and you want a loan, they'll ask you, they'll tell you they'll give you 500 cedis. What are you going to do with 500 cedis? So,
yeah. So we see. So this even confirms what we were discussing earlier. That it's not just about access to credit. We are talking about productive resources, and it's about land. It's about capital. It's about labor. It's about labor. So the issues are intersectional. She's raised issues around irrigation, and there have been issues around land and all that. So we need to look at all those things and not just think about when we give them money, that is it. It solves their issues. Is it different from what we've discussed already? Because
No,
I want to move on to another.
I just wanted to reiterate that we actually mentioned the Women's Development Bank and also gave some of that it was very necessary, but we also listed some of the things it could do to be sustainable, because we know that the World Women's Bank collapsed. So we gave points that could make it sustainable.
Okay, so please hand over your report to me now. I hope all the points are in there. Dema, or is it Esther? Please take the report. You also mentioned issues around partnership, and the bank should be PPP, public-private partnership. And the question that came into my mind was, how many women-owned businesses are benefiting from the PPP concept? And if we want to set up the bank based on PPP, how many women businesses will be able to be, I'm not saying you should respond, will be able to be part of that process? Even the banks, I know most of our banks owned by Ghanaians have collapsed, if not all. And even with those banks, how many were owned by women? That if, for instance, they are setting up a women's development bank and we want to, but if we want to call in private partnership, so it become public-private partnership, by all means, we'll be looking at the existing financial institutions and those that can partner. How many of them are even women-owned? So these are some of the things that we should think about. The issue about access to land and community-led banks, I think, is critical. And even Madam has given us an example of giving her group 50 acres to farm, and how we should also be able to ensure that if we are not getting the land as individuals, how do we then maybe get lands for block farming? There is also land banks. So the government, which lands, how are they interacting with traditional authorities, those custodians of land, to ensure that some lands are earmarked as land banks for maybe dedicated to women's farming and all those things. These are some of the things that would help us. So thank you, Group on Agriculture. Let's give them a hand. We'll move to trade. Can we have you've given your report. The report should go to the rapporteur. Okay. Okay. That's why I'm saying that the issue is intersectional. So there are lots, so you don't just talk about women in agri and just take it that the only thing they need is access to credit. That's why we said productive resources. There are a whole lot of issues that you need to understand, and there is the need for interventions to address those needs before we can have an agricultural sector that we will be proud of to say that it's inclusive. It takes the needs of both women and men into account, right? Okay, trade.
Okay, so good afternoon. We are in group 2. We discuss about trade. Yeah. Okay. So according to whatever we discussed on trade, we had this questions coming up, and then we discussed these questions and then had recommendations on that. So with one this morning, according to the presentation on the analysis, we had the barriers to the barriers where women faces during the ways to get trading from this from our country to other countries, especially to Nigeria. So with our question, it was inadequate trade facilitation measures for women through border barriers, procedures, customer systems, often poses difficulty in mobility and safety needs for women traders. We also had another suggestion: more training or advocacy or sensitization should be made on AFTA, and to also translate to local languages. I think according to this, the discussion was a lot of people doesn't know more about what AFTA do, and then there are other ways or other means that people had on AFTA. So there have to be mobilization or sensitization to the public on what AFTA do, and then how it can help the traders as well, especially the women. Yeah. So we also had a suggestion on climate change, which should be a standalone and not to cut across the country. So with the climate change, it shouldn't be cut across here, but standalone to be addressed according to the various sectors with our trading. And I think climate change is also affecting the trading system as well. So I think we have to also find ways and means to also address climate change in our trading system. We also had another suggestion on value addition, where we have to encourage women in organizations to produce more of raw materials in order to help those in the manufacturing firm, because there was an example that there is a company in the northern sector where they are into tomatoes, but then the company is willing to produce more of the tomatoes, but there are no raw materials for them to put into production. So we have to encourage the women or other traders or other grassroots to get involved in the raw material production. We also had another discussion on interministerial collaborations, where interministerial collaborations on women in trade issues. There should be joint collaboration when there is when the issue of gender or any other trading projects or trading issues or discussion comes up. There has to be joint collaborations for them to share ideas and then bring together what will be best for the public or the country as well. We also had suggestion on market access, how women can get access to market and then the local and foreign market. I think most of the people have ideas about how to import, how to have business within the country, but then how to start. Some have issues on that, and then how to implement their vision or their dreams as well. So there has to be ways and means, either advocacy or ways or channels for them to get the education and then how to start their business from the scratch. We also had unfair trade practices. We have to ensure we give them right certification, and then right certification engaging the various respective agencies for certification of businesses. We also had another issue coming up, which was partnership with market queens, transportation or logistics. I think with this one, we had various discussions on that, how market queens can also get involved in various discussions around the table. And then after the discussion, it has to be disseminated straight to the women down there to also know whatever has been discussed at the top, for them to be also motivated and then encourage them to be in the trading system. We also, under this, we had the discussion also came up about logistics and transportation. Yeah, we talked about the logistics, which was a little bit. I had this issue where we went to the northern region, and then people were complaining that they are done farming, they have their resource, whatever they planted, they've gotten it, and then the ways and means to bring it back to Accra or to the markets for them to get the sales is very expensive, especially in the transportation system. And then it's a little bit challenging, so they have to leave whatever they've sold or whatever they've planted there in their region and then sell it at a cheaper price. Maybe if there were ways and means for presentation or ways and means for them to get to their respective markets, it would have been more profitable to them. Yeah. So next we had, there should be research and development that will be suitable for trading. Yeah. So research and development, it came up where we have to do more research at the grassroots level for them to bring up their ideas or their suggestions, what is bothering them, for their issues to be heard in order to carry it up according to how the trading system wants to be. We also had another discussion on women's group representative. Yeah. So within our various discussions, anywhere that we have to discuss women's participation, we have to get the various grassroots women's rep to be also represented in the discussions around the table. With our recommendation, we had mechanization and ways for, no, this is not a recommendation, yeah, it's part of our discussion. So we also had mechanization ways for you to be involved in agriculture and then trading as well. I think recently we went to the rubber plantation in the eastern region, and then I'm the youth desk officer for my organization. So I asked them why they are not interested in agriculture. So the issue was, some were saying they want support from the government or any agency that can help them in these technological ways, either giving them financial support or provide them with these technological machines to also help them with this smart agricultural means, not going to the older days farming. Yeah. So I think that one too can also help in our trading system and then our agricultural system, which will let the youth be attracted to that. With the recommendation, we had a dedicated desk for women in trade in AFTA. I think my sister here also suggested that there has to be a dedicated desk for women in AFTA who will be dealing with issues from the women in SMEs and then trading in Ghana as well. Thank you.
I was here to provide moral support, but I'll just add two things. One, on market access. We specifically mentioned the Ghana Commodity Exchange and the NAFCO as areas that government can look at to make market access easier for women. And then on transportation, there's a lot of post-harvest losses when women are transporting their wares to the urban areas. So probably fashion transportation mechanisms that makes it feasible for them to bring the wares down without actually much distraction. I think that was
Thank you.
Thank you. You can have a seat and then we'll ask.
So this is real gender representation.
Oh, yes. So let's clap for them. I have to admit that because I was doing other things, I didn't put anything on paper. But I'm sure you all listened to already I have hands up. So I'm sure you listened to the presentation and we'll have a good discussion around it.
Tell the government that farmers should be exempted totally from paying tax. Number 2.
Star, Anita. They say you should take it to the government.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because not the exemption of 5 years and then maybe your crops are not even matured. And then they will come and be worrying you to pay tax. So number 2, tell government to scrap off FDA and GSA fees. They are too high for processors. Anything concerning food, especially local food stuffs.
Madam Rapporteur, I hope you are listening and you are recording everything.
FDA fees and GSA fees, they are too high. If you do FDA, they say you should go and do GSA also. Then I will sell my things in the local market on the streets of Accra. People will buy instead of sending it to the stores and then for export, because it's deterring a lot of processors from expanding their markets. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I just want to give a response to the FDA and GSA certifications that you mentioned. I work with Ghana Enterprises Agency, and we have some projects that supporting processors, especially women. Most of our programs are geared towards women development, so especially women, for you to certify your products with FDA under the business in a box project, that's the big box project. We are giving free registration, free certification for at least one product for women groups. So please, you can take it to your women and then look out for our offices. We have offices in all regions, in all districts. That's the business advisory centers. When you go to the district assemblies, mostly we are located in the district assemblies. You can locate us and then register with us, and we can help you get certification for the FDA, the GSA. They give some subsidies on that, and then even ORC registration too, we assist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam G. One of the things we are doing under this project is, after this study, we are going to do a training because you can't do this and then, so that's why we need the recommendations. One of the things we'll do is a training. I think one of the things we'll do is bring GEA on board to create awareness on some of the things that the women can benefit.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to, on the point Ma'am made about
them not paying tax.
No, the FDA and the GSA.
Okay.
I think the problem is on harmonizing the two. I think there has to be some form of harmonization or standardization, because they are all regulatory bodies. So maybe instead of paying this, and that, we can have on women.
When you say
youth.
we, who is we?
The IR Institute for Women. We did
Okay.
a research, and then after we did the stakeholder engagement, we realized that their major problem was harmonizing these standards, because they should be able to work hand in hand. So when you are paying these fees, it covers FDA, FDA standards and other regulatory bodies. So we can make it one, so that it doesn't make, so apart from even paying, picking a car, or even if the registration is online, it just makes the bureaucracy, reduce. Yeah, so I think when we harmonize these standards, it's good.
So when we talk about trade, we also have to think about the bureaucracies and how we can dismantle those bureaucracies to facilitate trade. Yes, ma'am.
So what I didn't hear about trade is pricing and then trading among the African region or West Africa region. So what we have seen that here in Ghana, we are lacking behind. Nigerians are leading. First, their pricing is very good. And I don't know how they are able to move their goods to other countries, but here in Ghana, even me, about 3 years ago, I got an order to send some palm oil to Nigeria, and the same border issues. So I think we should do more search on how we can move into these African markets, because the market is there, but barriers that are stopping us are many. And then our pricing, I've heard that Ghanaians have unfair pricing. But when I look at my production cost and everything, sometimes it's difficult to compete with our counterparts from the other regions. Ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So first, further trade, and then pricing, right? Part of the recommendations. Any others?
Thank you very much. I wanted to add to the taxes. I wouldn't say it should be scrapped, but I think maybe the concessionary period should be increased, because by the time you finish setting up and then marketing, you wouldn't have done anything. And then also, if the tax could be gender responsive, in the sense that it should be lower for women farmers or women agribusiness owners, instead of the same cut across manufacturers and then all that. I think it's unfair. Thank you. Yes, please.
An omnibus,
yes,
something that cuts across everybody. Any other contribution?
Yes,
But the taxes, when you go to the free zones and all those, in our quest to attract FDI, foreign direct investment, we waive 10 years for them. And what they do is that at the end of the 10 years, they fold up, they register another, they come again, if they are the same people, but they will change their name and come and enjoy another 10 years. So they will enjoy 10 years till kingdom come.
And most of them are even selling in country.
Yeah. Meanwhile, our own people are suffering. So these are some of the things that we should look at. And also, tax is something, because we also need to mobilize revenue to support the development of the country. So really, it's something that we need to look at. Ma'am, I think she will be... Okay, our final contribution.
Yes, so on the cross-border trade, that's what I want to comment on. I think that is what AFTA is addressing.
Yeah.
Just that the sensitization is very low, because at the AFTA they have the women and youth protocols that helps us to counter some of these barriers that our sister is talking about. Just that the sensitization is low. So I don't know, in this work, if you can do something about it so that the sensitization will...
So give us a recommendation,
yes,
then the consultants will add it.
That you should factor after sensitization in the project.
Yeah, it's in the report. Yeah. Nana, please use the microphone.
Translating it. So I talked about it, translating it to local languages, easier forms.
Please, we have a lot of side meetings.
Easier forms.
We are not leaving until we are done. So if you did your packed food, please don't give anybody's packed food lunch to them. We are not leaving till we are done. Okay.
So I was saying that I talked about education in these policies and talked about translating them into languages people understand and into simpler languages. Even so-called those of us who claim we are literate,
We don't know
understanding
what's in
some
the
of
after.
them is very difficult. So break it down into language that people can understand and make it simpler as well.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll end and move to the financial inclusion. You know, people want to leave, so if we don't leave on time, it's you.
Okay, thank you. So this is the group on financial inclusion, and I want to say that most of our points have been made by the first group, and we were even wondering if they were the ones discussing financial inclusion. So we discussed a couple of challenges, and one that came up was the difficulty with access to credit facilities for farmers especially and vulnerable groups. So from the discussion, we talked about the fact that most of these loan sharks are prominent in most of these farming areas, and then they give loans at very high interest rates, and even the repayments periods are not favorable for the farmers. So Mama mentioned that in some instances, even farmers are required to pay loans on weekly basis when their yields, even when they get their yields, even after 6 months or more. So then it's a bit unrealistic. So in terms of recommendation, we are asking that the various women's desks at the various banks, and then also the yet to be established Women's Development Bank really focuses on providing loans at flexible terms for women farmers and other vulnerable groups, which takes into consideration the low interest rates and then quite lengthy repayment periods, and then also more about managing the collateral, the expected collaterals, because most of these women do not have the required collaterals, and then also increasing the amounts that they can be able to access. There was also a discussion about business development services for women farmers and then also other vulnerable groups. So we discussed that the practice has been that the GEA convenes about 2 or 3 days training for most of these groups in some instances, but the real issue is that most of these farmers and then vulnerable groups require some hands-on work, and even in some instances they require that the bookkeeping is even managed for them. So we have a suggestion or a recommendation that the GEA or other related institutions focus on also training some agents in the various communities who can support these farmers with hands-on entries. And this recommendation is also coming on the back that when women are able to manage their businesses better, then they'll be able to even repay the loans that are given to them. There was also a discussion on establishing agency banks in most of the farming communities or remote villages. So the point is that most of the financial institutions or rural banks are usually several miles away from the communities. So we have a recommendation on setting up some agency banks in the communities so that they will be able to enhance access to bank accounts and then also savings, among others. We also discussed user experiences. So the challenge was about persons with disabilities and then even women sometimes not being able to access these digital platforms or even use the Momo, which we think is very simple. So our recommendation is for us to improve the user experience around that. We can complement these platforms with audios or videos that can really explain the processes to utilize them. We also discussed the point about awareness creation, where we think that there should be some collaboration with the NCCE to increase education around financial inclusion and then also access to these digital platforms. And when we read the report, we have a recommendation on the issues that were presented around financial inclusion. We felt that there was lots of information around digital platforms, but there's some bits of limited information around access to credits for women farmers and then the other vulnerable groups. One key discussion was also around the role of ADB. So in our group, we were discussing whether Agric Development Bank is really doing the business of Agric, because we feel that they should really be supporting most of these women farmers and then vulnerable groups. But the discussion was that they often focus more on the other businesses rather than the farmers and then those in the Agric value chain. Yes, so these are the key points we discussed. My colleague will also add.
Okay, thank you very much. So I want to add to the agency banking. So we've seen that most of the micro credit or microfinance go into the villages, and their services is not still including women and vulnerable people in the finances. So we look at a bank like Fidelity Bank. They have agency banking, and you still find them in Accra, instead of them being in the rural areas where these are commercial banks, and where women can actually work with commercial banks and maybe increase their financial portfolio. Also, we are looking at education and then capacity building. It is very important. But we think we should involve the informal sector, like market queens, like women shows on radio, like antenna shows and those shows that women are always listening to. Yes, let's use those people so that they can explain to the women to understand the financial tools that we are offering to them, for them to internalize it. Otherwise, you bring them to a nice place, train them, and they will still not feel it's not for them, it's for other people. Thank you.
So strategies also to ensure that we create awareness on even the existing opportunities that women can take advantage of. So I'll come to the group. Madam, is it something that you discussed in the group, or is something that it's like teacher? Okay. So please add.
I said the banks should give out loans on 1%, as it is done in Japan to farmers.
Okay.
Yes. It didn't show up there.
Okay. So any other? We are tired, so I don't want. Okay. Please take the mic. We have a rapporteur, so if you don't. And I don't know if our colleague online is still there.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to add on to the aspect she mentioned that women take on loans and then they are being charged on a weekly basis. If you observe, these loans are not given by the conventional banks, but the microfinance scheme. So maybe we can be talking about dedicated loan facilities or dedicated funds for women in trade and agribusiness.
Right, thank you. Okay, that's fine, thank you. I think now we are all tired, so I'm not going to sum up all that you've said. But one of the things I think here was the section on, and I think each group looked at it. I think it was only the financial inclusion group that I heard you saying something about persons with vulnerabilities, and you mentioned. But all the groups, I'm not sure I heard anything around persons living with disabilities. You mentioned it. Did you also mention it? Yeah. So, yeah, but quickly, from each, you can be in the agri group or you can, wherever. But quickly, can we have and also the recommendations, you did not even let us know whether what is there, it's okay. I know some few recommendations have come up, but we did not. So quickly, maybe 2 for each of the teams. Agri, which should be the 2 key things that you think, if it's not part of the recommendations that she has put up, it should come. Agri. So you say one and then someone else say one.
All right, thank you. I think the issue of alternative livelihoods.
Alternative livelihoods.
Yeah, so for example, when the season when the rains are no longer falling and the seasons are dry, especially the
that women farmers can do, women traders can do to enhance their businesses. So this will help us. So thank you. Any other? One more for agric. One more for agric. Agric going. Going. Should I say gone? One more for agric. Okay, let's come to trade. What are the two key things that you think it was not focused in the report, so you want to say in the report in terms of recommendation? Trade.
And all, but we should have that kind of platforms and then skills in the traders themselves, so that there will be maybe intermediary, the government can come in, but we should have it. Digital skills and then e-commerce platforms for trading the farm produce.
Right, thank you so much. I think it's key because when we talk about financial inclusion and you don't have digital skills, at times it's difficult. Because now most of the things is digital. But then we also need to think about how accessible it is and how everybody can get involved. Because she did raise the issue about someone calling someone to come and help them. And the person can decide to do their own thing with your money. And by the time you realize, you think you have 5 cedis in your accounts, but it's 0. Meanwhile, you think the 5 cedis is there waiting for you. So it's important that we look at that. Thank you. I think this is financial inclusion. But anything on financial inclusion? Great. Any final remarks from any of us? Nana, do you have any final remarks? Okay.
Thank you very much. On the document given on the Bridging the Gap, trade, under trade, page 25, it talked about the recommended trade instead of the after wording. So we should bear in mind that the after was coined from precedents.
It's not a recommendation. No. We are not recommending to change the name. I think we just said that the connotation, it's not.
Oh, okay, because
if you look at recommendations, it's not there. When you go to the recommendations. It was a critique of it. When you do work, people will criticize your work, like here, and we embrace it. If you do work and you don't get any critique, that's how new knowledge you build on it. So it's good to get criticisms for your work, and it's good. So you critique it, and then we move on. Maybe you go to a workshop, and then they ask you to coin a word. So you go to a workshop, if you are responsible for coining, then maybe you have in mind that the way you even form the acronym, you should give some connotations. So it's just a critique of it. I wanted to say that I think this is just the beginning of the work. This is not the end. The beginning of the work, and it's important that NetRights and their partners, they sit now and look at, I think we can't do everything. Like you said, priority. Financial inclusion, what do we want to do? Is it Women's Development Bank? Trade, is it that we want to pick after and see how women can be brought on board? Agric, do we want to look at land banks, or we want to look at funding or process, whatever it is, so that we pick the priorities. So the next step now is to prioritize the areas that are useful for each of the members. And then, like I said, I think Star Ghana has a framework that they did for the governance thing. But part of it is also relevant for this one. And look at how we can pick on some of the indicators that the manifesto and now budgets has make sure that we are tracking it. I think for me, the important thing is monitoring it and tracking it. The good thing is that they've said they will do it. So if you are tracking them, it's in order. Forming some kind of committee or something to review, maybe quarterly to look at it. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you too for the wonderful job that you've done for us. And I believe that with all the contributions, it will enrich. Already we have a good report, but these contributions will enrich the report. And as next steps also, one of the things, I think even when we're talking about after, for instance, we said it needs to be simplified because some of the words in it, even those, the doctors even don't understand it. So that's what we are going to do with this report. We will simplify it. We are not going to publish the big document where when you see it, you are scared to read. We'll develop infographics out of it. We'll develop policy briefs out of it. Even if some of the things we have to craft advocacy messages as posters, we'll craft it and together we'll all use it. And then also some of the recommendations that have come up. We'll see how it will influence the other activities on the project that we have to do. So thank you so much for coming. And I think we've earned our lunch. We can take our lunch, and I believe everybody has been sorted out. Right, okay. I learned we have to take a group picture. Oh my uncle Didi. Why are we all taking our food? Oh, okay. So please, let's quickly have a group picture, and then those who asked for lunch pack. I believe those of us who did not ask for lunch pack, now our eyes are, I wish I asked for lunch pack. Okay, thank you.